us, let us know.
Okay.
Are you ready?
Ready.
Okay. So I wanted to thank everyone for coming and sharing a Sunday afternoon with us. My name is Elaine Waterman. I am the executive director here at the Firehouse Art Center. The Firehouse Art Center is a nonprofit that is in the heart of downtown Longmont on 4th and Kaufman. We provide life-enhancing art experiences through exhibitions, education, and cultural events. Our artist talks are casual chats with artists, curators, members of the creative community, and creative entrepreneurs with a focus on how to build community within the arts. There are spaces here, so if you want to, there's some spaces in the front, and I think maybe a few chairs. Yeah.
We'll all stare at you awkwardly.
Yeah. Anyway, Artist Talks give the community a chance to ask questions and get to a deeper level with the art on our walls. We are taping this talk, and you can find it on our YouTube channel along with our past Artist Talks and presentations. I wanted to start with a couple of updates from the Firehouse Art Center. We have life drawing tomorrow and then also the last Sunday of the month. We also have weekly art classes and monthly meetings for songwriters, filmmakers, writers, artists, and more. Please visit our calendar on our website. And I also wanted to give a shout out to the sponsors: LDDA, Longmont Creative District, Scientific and Cultural Facilities District. That's what that is. The Longmont Community Foundation, the Community Foundation of Boulder, Boulder County Arts Alliance, and Colorado Creative Industries. We couldn't connect our community to creative and life-changing art experiences without your help. If you would like to donate to supporting our programs and exhibitions, please do so at our website, firehouseart.org. And lastly, in the spirit of healing, the Firehouse acknowledges and honors the Arapaho tribe, the original people of the land upon which the Firehouse sits. We also wish to acknowledge all other indigenous tribes and nations who call Colorado home. It is because of their hardships and sacrifices that we are able to be here sharing this art with you today. The Firehouse believes that we can only grow when we have a better appreciation for the history, legacy, and contributions that the tribes have made, not just to this region, but to the nation. I am so excited to be here today with resident artist Lee Lummus, and I just wanted to give a little background on the residency. The Firehouse Art Center hosts a summer and winter residency each year, working in the South Gallery before a culminating solo exhibit in the main gallery. The artist-occupied program at the Firehouse is intended as a professional development opportunity for emerging and experienced visual artists, where we hope it'll bring the artist's work to a new creative level, as we also connect visitors to working artists' environments and processes. Previous resident artists include Heather Kegel, Jessica Forrestal, Roberta Restano, Chelsea Gilmore, and now Amy Lummus.
Yes. You guys, there's 3 seats here.
Yeah.
If you guys want to jump up.
You sure?
Okay.
Okay.
We were here to see, and I'm so sorry, my cousin's art.
Upstairs?
Is that okay?
Yeah.
I'm so sorry.
You're good.
She's in here.
So, thank you for being here.
Yeah, absolutely. Can I start off with a quick thing?
Yes.
Start off real light, everybody. A young lady reached out to me about a month ago about one of her missing friends, and the police weren't taking it quite seriously then, but they are taking it quite seriously now. She's been missing since December 12th, and her name is Sarah Estaque, and if you'd like more information, or if you'd like me to send you a social media post or anything, let's get this girl found. We're not sure. We don't have any other details other than she's been missing for about 2 months. So it's fine, Sarah. Please let me know, and I'll DM all the information, everything the Arapaho Sheriff's Department's been putting out. But insofar as that's concerned, yeah. So it's starting on a light note, but I did want to throw that out there.
I wanted to just give a little info on you with your bio. So Amy creates both acrylic paintings and kinetic sculptures. She holds a bachelor's degree in fine arts from the University of Northern Colorado. Her creative journey weaves the realms of traditional monochromatic portraiture and contemporary carpentry. Amy attempts to capture the essence and story of her subjects through portrait and motion, with a focus on advocacy. Amy continues to shape her message through kinetics, electricity, engineering, and realism. She currently resides in Thornton with her family. So I guess I just wanted to get started. Let's see, what will be my first question to you? How has it been being a resident here at the Firehouse?
Oh, it's been fabulous. So I don't know if any of you are working or plan to, I don't know, get further involved with the Firehouse, but what I found here that I had kind of been bereft of in my professional career prior was that feeling of camaraderie and making that you get from that collegiate atmosphere that you really don't get outside of that. And I don't know how it works in other fields, obviously. I've been doing one thing for my entire life. So I'm pretty single-minded in that regard. However, I think a lot of the members here were really into the aspects of making and how my making, could be, drew parallels to their making. And so that kind of feedback and that kind of, honest feedback without that guise of competition or that, I don't know, a little bit of professional unsure, I don't know. There's that kind of weird competition level that you sometimes get in certain groups. Didn't exist here. It's just been really familial and incredibly loving, and it was a truly edifying experience in my making that I had yet to experience anywhere else besides family gatherings. So making things here felt like being home.
Oh, I love that. Anyway, I definitely feel the same way. Like, I feel like the Firehouse Art Center is just kind of a place where people come together, and I feel like the people that are really active here kind of do feel like it's a family. So I really love hearing that from you. As you are gonna walk through, we're gonna do an artist walkthrough at the end, but I just wanted to point out, most of these pieces have things that you can touch, that you can interact with, that you can twist, you can turn. Has your process and your medium always been this interactive?
Absolutely not. However, I think it was always that was always the eventual intention. Mm-hmm. I want to be interacting with the viewer, and I want the viewer to understand my work in a way that makes sense. And so it's funny, I'm looking at my friend Nate, because I remember one of the first things that he's seen a lot of shows. And I said, read the artist statement. And he's like, okay, God, I literally just stepped foot in the door. I'm like, no, because I really want those messages to become clear, as does every artist, but I also have very focused intention with whom I'm painting and what I want to say. And so I think I'm digressing from your question.
No, that's okay. That's okay. We're gonna segue. You mentioned something about artist statement, and I wanted to kind of bring that to the title of the exhibit. So the title of the exhibit is Spit and Splinters.
It's so glamorous.
But I mean, how does that connect with what you were saying about the subject matter and kind of the materials?
Okay, well, it's a really good question and a really tricky one. What I wanted to say in a title was something completely non-glamorous, because as you can attest, I'm not an especially glamorous individual. I'm typically covered in sawdust, and I've got some kind of bodily fluid from my children and or somebody else's on me. Or an animal. So that being said, I also wanted to give kind of homage to the experience of women in general, but women in these stories. Not that men don't experience gender-based violence as well. However, the people that I was painting were all female identifying. Mm-hmm. So the idea of spit, I wanted to use alliteration, of course. course, because I like those.
Me too.
But I wanted to think of something that was, first of all, uniquely me, and then second of all, uniquely to that experience of kind of growth, but also backslide, growth, moving forward, moving sideways, because I feel that that's very much our story of survival as humans. That's not, that forward moving process isn't authentic to the replication of stories. So what do I say about me as an artist, and what do I say about my subjects? Well, first of all, my immediate reaction upon hearing a lot of these stories is, and how do you do that in a name? You don't. So, it's a very visceral reaction to kind of upon hearing these stories. And the other part of it, it's something that connects us all. It's this fluid. It's gross. It's weird, but our mothers,
Yes.
And I do it to my paintings all the time. Things aren't quite right. That kind of, I don't know. It's a very animal thing, and so it's when I want to, visually express our mental states and our survival as humans, and finding parallels between that and gender-based violence, that sort of survival, that, it's kind of that connection, that animal connection that we all have. And Splinters, it's like the owies, you got to pull them out and keep going, right? And then it's also like,
Yeah, definitely.
If anybody's ever played with wood, you know that, that moment. So yeah, but I also, it's a love-hate relationship that I have with the connotation of words. So I wanted it to be a little bit weird. Spit's a good one.
Yeah.
Spit's a good word for that.
So that is the title of your exhibit, but if you look through, we have a portfolio that is put together for the exhibit. And if you look through it, and the titles of the pieces are actually titled just study number 1, 2, 3, movement, 1, 2, 3, 4, but then each of them has a subtitle. So what is this subtitle?
What's this thing? Yeah, okay. So Barbara Kruger, I don't know if you guys are familiar with her work. She was one of the female artists in 1960s or 50s. I'm not entirely sure. I should have known that. However, she used a very short first title, and then her subtitles would be, her exploration through the work. So as that is my muse and kind of my way of formatting, which was actually pointed out to me by my partner Lou. It's like, this is a really cool way of handling this. So I've been doing that for about 5 years. And what I'd like to do is find a verifiable, researched and, what is it? Bibliography? What is that thing? I don't know. It has factual backing. That's the thing I'm trying to say. Cited source. Yes. I want a fact that's been cited with, some kind of research that gives a little more concrete evidence to the feelings of my subject, if I can. Mm-hmm. And if I can't do exactly that, then I try to do something that I feel my model would say, that resonates with me. That fact resonates with my story, and I feel that is an evidence-based thing that gives breath and meaning to what I want to say to the world. So that's kind of my exploration in that. However, upon beginning this work, I had some pushback on whether these facts were real or not. And now I don't think I'll ever stop doing it that way, because I feel very deeply that facts aren't feelings, feelings aren't facts, and so much of art is about feelings. However, advocacy isn't. So if you're trying to kind of play through that intersection of work, then you really do have to find that kind of gentle, like stream in between. And by just involving that little bit of fact, that little bit of research, that allows for that advocacy piece to really shine through.
Yeah. And so moving on to advocacy, you are obviously depicting, portraits and images of models that are real people.
Yeah.
So you were advocating for them and you were sharing their story. How was that as far as interviewing people?
That's a really good question. How is it? Well, most of these things are just conversations. And so it's not always a sit down formal situation. Sometimes it's a few conversations in passing, and then it's, hey, I'd really love to use you for this work, and a few whatever messages back and forth. Sometimes it's not even that. Sometimes it's me reaching out to somebody who I find visually inspiring and who I find their stories really interesting. And the one model in particular, she just gave me some access to some videos she'd made of herself singing and rapping. I was like, oh my God, okay, here we go. I don't know how to do this right now, but I learned very quickly, which was great, because she's not in town, so it's fantastic. How is that? I have to completely divest myself emotionally from that. I'm not anyone's therapist, and I'm not here to tell your story verbally, but I also want to be a person of trust. So if someone feels comfortable with me representing them visually, I have to play the part of just a vessel. So there's a moment there where you have to lift the lid off of your brain and just exist in a plane of you're just the screen, and they are they're the water coming through, and then eventually left on the screen there's all that gold, and you can take that and mold it into whatever it is that you want to say. It's not easy, but I think it's my responsibility at this point, especially as I was speaking to that young lady, Sarah, the woman that reached out to me about her friend going missing. We just met at an opening for somebody else, and she just said, oh yeah, and just get to spitballing, and then you find out that now you have to, because everybody has that story. But the fact that 90% of American women at the end of their life will report some kind of sexual assault and surviving some kind of gender-based violence, that can't be right? That can't be a thing. So what do? You can't go around telling everybody all of these facts, and you can't go around telling everybody, this is what make art about. That's absolutely inappropriate, right? So you just take on, you're the screen, let it flow, and if you find something that you feel compelled to make, then you do that. And I hope at the end of the day that that's the right approach, Mm-hmm. But if it isn't, we'll go back to the drawing board and fix it and do it right the second time there, So, I think your question was what is that experience like? It's not a good one, but it's also not a bad one, right? I think it's on, if you're creating in earnest, you must divest yourself from the thing you're creating in a way that understanding that this is not you. It is of you, but it is not you. And it is of this other person, but it is not them. It is a tool that we employ to develop our experiences and communicate our experiences as human beings. And, the better we wield that tool and the more precision we can, with more precision that we can utilize that tool, the better humans we become, the more efficient we communicate. And I think that that's the whole jam, right? That's why we're here. So
I heard you say that when you create the art, you have to make sure that as the artist, it is not you. but is there a way that you feel personally connected, or how is your personal experience related to the subject matter?
Well, I think that it's everything, right? I don't know. You know, that's a lot. Let's see, where do I begin? I think there's a lot of things that have happened in my life, but there's a lot of things that I've seen also around me, and the things that I feel are most frustrating is just this need for I guess like societal proof, that we have to prove that this is real and it's happening. I don't know. But I guess the real call to action for me is I want to be authentic to people's story, and I remember feeling unheard at one point in my life, feeling deeply unheard. And not that I wanted to yell my story at the top of the roof or whatever, but I wanted to be understood in a way that felt right to me. Mm-hmm. And I wanted my truth to be the truth and not be an opinion. Mm-hmm. And because I knew for a fact that it was, it was there. I know, And why do I have to prove that this is real? It was real. I was there. So how do I give that to somebody else? And that's where this all comes, and kind of that's what I want to do for the world, I guess. It's just take these stories, turn them into something that, look, there it is. Mm-hmm. And no matter what, in 1,000 years, somebody at one point thought you were that story, and you inside that story was so special that they wanted to memorialize that. So I don't know. Hopefully that answers your question.
Yes. And I think that the fact that you put in these facts really kind of ties with that experience that you had, mm-hmm. and then the wanting to share the stories and then keep those facts as like the subtitles. So I definitely see that. I know we've had conversations before about your past work. And you were saying that it was not always interactive and not always 3D. What was your work like before, and why did it change? Why did it switch?
Well, I was doing two-dimensional works, and it was also around survivors. However, what I wanted to create was a more dynamic portrait. And so what I started doing was, kind of giving like a midline to my subjects, and then shifting the center point of the face, and what is portraiture, and how do we take my technicals through, how do I, or these artists or whatever, take that skill set and push it one step further. And so I was very good at the replication of what I could see, mm-hmm. but that's not all of it, So starting with the series prior to this one, Middle Murder, it's about kind of owning your martyrdom and not being led into victimhood, but allowing your inner ferocity to kind of let your story shine. Using those shifts as kind of a visual representation of headspace and how we think, and then I got really into neuroscience and how kind of what happens in our brains as we transfer into our survival modes, what happens to our brains in survival mode, and how we can literally fracture the way we think. And so, this was myself then, and then we kind of in our brains, and we literally reroute our neurotransmission into a whole nother way of being, because and how that's good, and how that can also lead people to feeling that they're no longer their selves, and what that feels like. And so how do I visually explore that? So those kinds of surrealist shifts, and then I got really interested in squares. And then it all started. So at that point, when I got really obsessed with like the pattern of X and then the pattern of square and shifting squares around and taking pieces of our bodies and what if that, and somebody called it cubist and I was like, oh, this is not that,
To be square.
Right, exactly. And it's storytelling, but it's storytelling in surrealism, and it's Dali-esque. It's not a cubist, but it is a little. But I find I talk a lot about employing line and artists out there. Hey, technical jargon here. Our stroke work and the way we control our stroke really changes how the viewer sees the work and how the viewer can glean meaning from the work. So with every stroke, you're actually directing the eye and how we can use shape to move the eye in the places that we want it to go, kind of like a magician, if you will. I don't know if y'all are into fantasy books like me, but really like magic. So kind of that magic and creation and how you can just, manipulate your viewers to do what you want them to. And then from that, doing that into a two-dimensional space, I'll never forget that moment where I was watching people look at some of the stuff I had created for metal and going, God, it'd be so cool if that moved. Ooh. And so I started playing around with pulleys, which are the worst. If anybody wants to do it, I fully discourage it. Go gears. And then we'll still have a long discussion about why those suck. But, and I do not know enough about mechanical engineering to know all of those things to make really efficiently moving structures. But yeah, so that's kind of how it all began. And then I found out how very hard it is. But that's kind of the fun thing about it.
Mm-hmm. So that leads me to two questions, but I'm going to start because you were just talking about the not fun parts of working with the stuff that you work with, or working with the wood and the pulleys and the gears. What was the one piece that you just wanted to throw out the door?
Oh boy. All of them? I remember at one point, it was actually doing a piece of Mackenzie, and I was literally in the throes of having been up for about 24 hours because I, had over-caffeinated and too late in the day, and then just decided, well, why not? It's quiet in the house, let's just get things done. And there's a moment there where you think, God damn it, why didn't I just stick to painting? And then you go, because it didn't do what I needed it to do, and not that paint has ever let me down, it never has, but it doesn't do what I need it to do, which is telling the metaphor, giving that authentic metaphor that goes and explores all of the things. The best artwork doesn't hit the nail on the head. The best artwork, and it doesn't have to be perfectly visually representative of the thing, If the thing you're trying to say is freedom, it can be anything, but it needs to not say freedom, right? And so what I was going at is, how do I tell a story of bravery, of survival, of the daily struggle of that's the past and this is the future and I can move forward, and that daily, that kind of, and we all do it, not just people that are survived violence, but everyone. And how do I draw those things together? And it has to move, because especially once we put everything down and once we are physically present with a material, you will remember it better. And suddenly now I've created in my viewer, I've not only created this person who's using my visualizations of, my mindscape or my survivor's mindscape to, rethink their own stories, but suddenly now they're moving within that story. And now now I've broken that third wall. Now they're part of the story, and now that authentic advocation can begin, because suddenly you don't remember anything else about it. You leave the art show, but you remember, oh yeah, this thing I was moving, and you know what? I remember she had on the wall this thing that said, and suddenly now I have somebody whose mind has been a little changed, and maybe a little more aware. And maybe next time they look around and see somebody in a slightly unsafe situation, and they do stop. Say, can I help you? Is there something wrong? What's going on?
Mm-hmm.
Bang. You know, and that's that moment that you get somebody physically involved, your memory, you remember that moment in a different way in your brain. And that's how we learn, right? Most of us don't even learn with just a piece of paper. Most of us learn in a very physical sense.
Yeah. This leads me to the question that I was going to ask. So you spoke about a specific model's experience and how you took that sculpture and you tied it with that experience and that story. I know that there's another model that you spoke with who is a writer, and you incorporated words and like audio. Are all of the pieces, and we can talk about that specific piece in a little bit,
Sure.
Are all of the pieces like that, where you can be like, oh, my decision to use this for this specific sculpture is because that model said this or experienced this?
Yeah. So there will be some preparation work involved. It's so funny. We was just talking about this with Erica. So I do a little bit of prep where I'll find something visually stimulating and I'll say, ooh, that like weird origami thing looks really interesting. And maybe I'll play around and I'll build it, and then it'll go in the corner for a while. And then upon meeting somebody, and then I don't have any idea where it'll go in kinetic. So maybe I'm going to throw some glass on top of it. It's going to be a table at home. You know, it doesn't always have that kind of destination. However, by and large, what will happen is I'll meet somebody, I'll hear their story, and then I'll start to percolate on how do we authentically visualize this in story format, you know, like, and how can we move with it? How can we tell a story, you know, like, what is it? It's like you could tell the story of a leprechaun by watching him go across the rainbow or whatever, you know, but how do we tell this human story in a way of movement? And maybe that movement is small, because maybe they're still really in that story. Maybe the movement is this. But maybe the movement is this, you know, or maybe it's something entirely different that I haven't yet explored and found out. And then I go to the back of the workshop and I'm like, there it is. That's what it is. So it's kind of a combination of both things. It just depends on where I am with my making and where they are with their story. However, sometimes I finish the two-dimensional work and I just can't bear to part with it. And I just look at the way my model's looking back at me, and I say, nope. And so then, for instance, like with some of these two-dimensional, it just has to stay two-dimensional. And I jump to a new format and find a way to do it another way. Mm-hmm. So you'll see a lot of these, it's like the sketch will just stay. And either I take that sketch and I, you know, morph it or change it or whatever, or I just make a new piece for her or them.
And I wanted to give you more time to talk about the piece that I was referring to, the piece with the recordings that was on here.
Sure.
So when you press the buttons,
Mm-hmm.
So what is that process? Tell me what that is.
Okay, sure. So my model for that piece, again, that was one of the ones where I had something kind of in the back that I'd been playing with. I just liked the look of, you know, what the wood was doing, and had it sitting back there. And when I met this individual, they were just she just gave me origami, you know, it was kind of that unfurling and unfolding. And I love that idea of that patterning. How do you make a square unfold, you know? How do you make a square, I don't know, go in, go out, I don't know. How do you make it move? But this individual was very solid in themselves, you know? She knew herself inside outside. She knew the bad days. She knew the story. She knows the backside. She understands all of that part, all of that that hard part about survival. And she works every day to make things better for the folks around her. And she knew that it didn't need to move that much. But what she did say during our interview was that words are everything to her, that the words get her through. And what resonated with me with that is that, sometimes the vehicles that we're choosing to, the boats we're riding down the river are not necessarily movement. For me it is, for me it's getting weird with saws and sawdust and paint and all of that. But for some of us it isn't. And so in that, I found that her piece definitely didn't need to move, but it needed to speak. Mm-hmm. And so how do we do that? And boy, oh boy, was that a challenge. And so any of my artist friends can attest, it'll be the 2 a.m. message where I'll be like, okay, so here's my idea. All right, could it be better? And it's like, no, it sounds fine. Or that could be really interesting, and then, okay, is there any way I could have made that better? Or could you think of any way to, expand on it? No, it's good. Then I'll move forward. And I love that feedback. But it had to speak. And so how do you make something speak? But how do you also say all the things that movement says? It can't be 1 word, can't be 8 words, can't be 12 words. It has to be 360 something words. So
how many buttons are on it?
There's 14 buttons.
Okay. And it cycles through?
Each button has 16 synonyms for the same word.
Oh, crazy.
So there's over 7 million iterations of whatever the poem says. The message is essentially that, in our seeking, we're going to find the roads that no longer serve us. But breaking away from those roads can be the bravest thing you can do. So do that. Yeah. But it says it in really fun ways. And my 7-year-old daughter, I keep trying to call her 6, you guys. She's always going to be 3. I don't know. She keeps growing. It's not fair. But she recorded over like 300 some of these words for me. And yeah, listening to her try to say like pontificate was just like,
it's so cute.
It is so beautiful. And what was so lovely was my model, she sent me a message later and we spoke over, the kind of what I was trying to say with it. And it was just that I felt like if I had done nothing else, she felt seen. And I was, it was like a moment because it was one of those things that if that's all I want to be here to do, it was mission accomplished. But thank God for people willing to help collaborate because, if it weren't for that, I don't know. And trying to write synonyms, especially.
But I think it's really great. So right next to the piece are pads of paper. And so you could actually create your own poetry based on what the buttons say as you press it, which I think is just a fantastic connection to your model, who is a writer. So awesome.
And a poet and an advocate and just a general BADASS because there's children here.
So I think that's most of these. And I wanted to make sure that everyone in the audience had a chance to ask questions, and then we'll come back and kind of close it off. But is there anyone, do you have any?
I can't even know.
The age was really important because my person, that was the start of something for her at that age, and that was kind of where her story of survival began. So it was awfully convenient that I had a person at my disposal who is that same age. Yeah, or close to 6, 7. Yeah.
To backtrack, sorry.
No.
I'm not trying to interrupt you. But I thought that was probably the case, but I just thought it was. Also, when you were talking about spit and splinters, first thing that came to mind was when we lick our wounds.
Oh, I never thought of that.
So I just thought I'd throw that out there.
So can you say that again just a little bit louder?
Yeah, no, I just was saying when you were speaking on the spit and splinters and talking about how that all interacts, the first thing that came to my mind is that we always say, well, I have to go and lick my wounds. And, spending that time with obviously the bodily fluid aspect, but also the fact that you're removing yourself from what's happening and taking the time to regroup and then leading into that as well when you're talking about the I keep looking at this kiddo over here, so it's just a good example, but it also, when you were talking about how it fits together and how we fracture our brain, but also how those experiences truly do fracture us and having to pick up the pieces, so to speak, of yourself.
So out here hitting those metaphors.
So, anyway, I just want to throw that out there because I thought, that's, something to comment on and also to take that a little bit of a different direction where you said you spent so much time in neurology and studying that, and I think that's fantastic.
Yeah.
I just also, that's kind of like on a I don't want to say a dumber level, because that's not, but on more of a layman's term level type of situation where you're just like, that is, when you break a plate, it shatters. And it's never going to look exactly the same, but the pieces are all going to look different and have different shapes and come back together in a similar way, but not the same.
Love it.
And
that's delicious.
So sorry, this kiddo is like, I keep sharing, that's exactly right.
And then also, I was thinking about splinters, like if you don't address a splinter, like if it just stays in there,
What?
You've done a great job. Is it other
Oh. Yeah, you guys have thought about all that stuff.
That's what you meant to.
Yeah.
Anyone next?
I'm really curious about your choice to use black and white. Like, if you could talk about color or lack of color and how that plays into your choices and maybe any meaning behind any of that. And like I saw some color, like the pink over there that's like,
Yeah, this kind of the
stands out.
fluorescent
And
red.
you're even wearing black and white, and your headband is black and white.
White.
I'm like kind of guessing.
Do you want to
Yeah.
talk about the walls of my house?
Yeah, I'm seeing like maybe there's meaning there.
Whoa, certainly, there certainly is. So there's a real intentionality with that. I definitely think that, again, where do we as humans connect and where do we disconnect? And how do we connect with our viewer? The one thing I do know is that there's one surefire way to know that to gain empathy. And that's eyeballs. Weirdly, as humans, there's a whole weird part of our monkey brains that when we see the other one's eyes, it clicks. We go, oh, all right. We start paying attention. And that's a really important thing about portraiture to me. And that's a big reason why I use portrait to tell a story. However, the reason I don't use color is because color is very subjective. And there's no way to absolutely test whether your blue and my blue are the same blue, right? So and that's the first thing we see. We only see in black and white when we are infants. That's the only way we see. And so to absolutely know that my viewer is getting the thing that I want them to see is by going about it in black and white. And there's a lovely, every person quality to that I think there's more to that, metaphor and whatever. Also, as I started using pops of color, it started with a colleague saying to me, love that, love all that. Here's the problem. I'm starting to view this as newsprint, and I'm not looking at it anymore as face, or I'm not seeing portrait, I'm scanning. And also because I use boxes and lines, it is very connotative of a newspaper. And so we kind of tend to do that and not look for detail. So take a little detail here, a little detail there, and I wanted to go back to what is the most human, what is the easiest color to see. The first color we see is red. So that's the one thing that we know, or at least supposed to know, it's red. But even, it's funny you say pink, because I'm like, oh, it's all red, right? You know, the attempt was to kind of, I get this like really fluorescent red, so I was using this like, I don't have a huge attachment to using really like recycled materials or anything like that, which I find so lovely in others' work, but I do not worry too much. I use some plastic, nasty for the environment, bright acrylic to make that like really bright red. But it is effective in what it's doing, hopefully. But yeah, I don't know if I'll ever completely dive into color for this type of work. You know, I do it occasionally for a commission, or if it's somebody's, you know, request. Like, I really love it if my model had something to say about that. But yeah, primarily it's black and white.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. What's up, man?
Why do you have like lots and lots of layers on most of your art pieces? Like this one doesn't have many layers, but those ones over there have many. Why do you have so many layers?
That is an excellent question, my friend. Oh, brilliant. Well, I think that layer can tell a really interesting story. You know, when you're looking at someone's face, that's one thing. But then when you're trying to show a brain, you can't just show them a picture of their brain, right? So how do you say this person is struggling with different parts of their brain, and how to say that in a way that you don't just say, right here, this is the thing that means this, you know? So that's why I try to use layer. And if there's layers, it helps you look a little deeper, and then a little deeper, and then a little deeper. And I like that. Thank you. Yeah, and I've really been interested recently in plexiglass, being able to see through things, or push the viewer to look through things. And how that works, and you know, kind of that relationship. But I really also like lines and squares. And so if I can, I pile those things on something. But yeah, I really love those visuals. It's, yeah, there you go. Thanks for that question.
I have like a few things to say. I'll try to be quick. The first thing is the black and white thing that was brought up. Kind of reminded me of what you said about you wanting it to be seen as facts and things that actually happened, and not just the emotional. So there it is in black and white. You know, it's just a lot of things you're saying show up in your work, and you're like, oh, well, that's great. But it's like it's all in there, you know.
Well, thank you.
And I think we all appreciate your work a lot because it is work, and you didn't just have to make it look, you know, aesthetically pleasing or conceptually the way you wanted, but like physically, reality, like it had to work, like it had to function in this social environment where people could come out and actually interact with it. And that's so relatable, you know,
Yeah.
like actually making sure, you know, you don't just look good out there, like it's working, like it is working, you know.
Thank you.
You're
We
able to
talked a lot
actually
about that. Yeah.
interact.
Thank you. You were there one day when we were
That makes sense.
like,
Yep.
why won't it work?
Exactly, and that you have to actually go through those like struggles to make it work.
Yeah, yeah.
And that shows, like, I think all of that's imbued in there, and that's like so appreciate that.
Thank
That's
you.
part of your work.
Thank you.
And then my question is, because this was both of our first residencies.
Yeah.
And your work is a lot about like vulnerability as well, and I wonder if you felt any vulnerability or anything different about working in that space. Maybe you didn't. Maybe it was like you said, it felt like home and it was very comfortable. But was there anything different about working publicly
Outside of your house.
outside of your house? And maybe you've done that before. I haven't talked to you much about, you know, that, having studios or anything, but the residency experience, like being there and being open.
Versus your home studio or your personal studio.
Yes.
Sure. I think that there were goods and bads in both ways. So there's definitely, very occasionally, but definitely an aspect of folks coming in from the French doors on the side on Kaufman, when they're propped open, people popping their heads in, and you're in flow mode, and you kind of have to pull up the brakes and say, oh, yeah. Let me answer these questions, because that's part of the gig, you know, and that's your responsibility. There was also in the beginning, I was so worried about ruining the gallery experience for people coming in here, and I'm running the router, and it's like, and I'm like, don't mind me. And I was so worried about being like that thing, and
The noisy tenant?
yes. That I was kind of I don't know, I was really shy about that part of my making at first.
Did we alleviate that feeling for you?
Immediately, yeah, you were like, no, we gotta open this thing up, we
that's
gotta make
part
this.
of it.
Yeah.
That's what people need to hear.
So there's some level of, you have to anticipate your flow getting a little wonky, and being able to go back to that. And actually, this is wonderful. I was anticipating that, and I did a little bit of research again. I'm loving this neuroscience thing. So how do you trigger flow state? And how do you do it as quickly as possible? So I actually did research about this, and I got the taste smells. Those are the fastest and easiest ways to trigger your flow state. And so how do you do that? When you're in flow, you put a smell on. And so that is why I had the diffuser on all the time with the essential oil. So I had these 2 essential oils that I started about a month prior to the residency that I do when I was like really in my full moment of making, or I put it on before I knew I was going to be working for a while. And then once I got in here, I knew I had X amount of hours. And me and time don't get along. Like we are old enemies, and that thing. If I know that my time is limited in a studio space, my real output is not happening. That's the good stuff when I'm in there and I forget who I am and I'm just the screen. I'm just plowing through or cutting things up and problems are getting solved left and right. But the only way I can do that is if I know I have unlimited time to go. So that I don't have to be a mommy, or I don't have to be a partner, or I don't have to do this or that or the other. So I don't have to put on my other hats. And that's the best way. For me, it was smell, and then I went through routine. So I made sure that about a month prior to this that I had a very, very specific routine. I even brought it to chapstick, because I was like, maybe some days I'm not going to want to eat that thing. So I had this chapstick that I brought that every time before I'd work, I'd be like, there's my cherry chapstick. There's my smell. So I got the taste, I got the smell, and it worked. Dog dagnabbit, whatever.
It feels just visceral enough, like your work, like it's a bottom.
Yeah, it worked
it.
like that. And so anytime that somebody would come in and interrupt or whatever, all I had to do, turn back on that diffuser, put that chapstick back up, like it was a whole routine. And so, yes, do that. If anybody's a maker out there and has limited time, like learn your weird things your idiosyncrasies that cause flow, do that. And then I'm learning I'm learning to be a more active listener, to shutting up, because I think in my storytelling, I try to tell you what to think, and that's not my job as the maker. So when, a couple times some folks came in to tell me how to work a tool that I was actively working, you just nod and smile, and
That's really what I was getting at.
Yeah.
I got there.
It's fine. And there's ways that sometimes I employ tools that they're not supposed to be used. And I broke messed up my chops out doing that or something. But for the most part I know what I'm doing. So, yeah, it's a good question. I think but that's part of being a good artist, right? That we're taking that moment to tell the folks around us that they matter. Hit me.
So I understand that the Firehouse residency focuses a lot on community engagement, especially when dealing with either a triggering, whether that be for women who have experience, or sometimes men who feel like, well, I'm not like that. What are you trying to say about dudes, man?
Yeah.
What did you do to involve the community? What considerations did you make, and how'd it go?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
Okay, so the first thing I did was one of the first openings was really shortly after I moved in. So I put out a big pad and I asked people to start writing down questions that they wanted to know. And some of the first folks in the door that wanted to look at the work immediately asked if, hey, I would love to pose for you. Because I said, if you'd like to pose or whatever, leave me your info. I actually had people that I didn't get to for this. So that was really lovely. So by the time word kind of started getting spread that I was like, hey, I'm actively looking for anybody with a story to tell that feels comfortable talking to me. And I usually leave it open to like, hey, just give me a few adjectives about your experience. If you don't want to go into a story, we don't have to. That's not part of what I'm here for. Whatever feels right for you. And if you're comfortable giving me your face and your time, but yeah, the initiation was that, and then word spread, and people approached me, which was wonderful.
Yeah.
Because I didn't have to do the work that other way or go through a nonprofit and kind of go through that spider web of all of that. So yeah, this was quite lovely. Just folks just, hey, I'd be happy to do that if you need that. So it goes back to this being a very comfortable atmosphere. And it's so great too when there's so much going on here. There's songwriters and there's poets and there's filmmakers and there's writers and so your making isn't the people that you're bouncing ideas off of and so forth. They're not just visual artists, but they are creators. So they do have a, kind of that input and creative juice flowing. So it makes it such a welcoming atmosphere to have that.
And I just wanted to tag on to that. So you have models that you have done portraits for this show, and they come in and see that. So how does that usually how does that play out?
Sometimes
these are personal stories, right?
Yeah. Sometimes the people that I paint don't want to see it at all. And they don't, and that's good too. Sometimes it's a much more involved process, like with the sounds and so forth. Sometimes it's like I'd like to be a part of this, or what I think is overall is that immediately when you didn't hit the nail on the head. It's pretty self-evident. But the best way I found to hit the nail on the head is to immediately take notes after your session or your quick interview or your talks or whatever. If you get the opportunity to have that formal sit down, take notes. And what I always say to people who don't feel that they're good at drawing people or who would like to get better at it, it doesn't have to be the person precisely to communicate what you want it to. It has to feel like that experience you had with them or that you want your viewer to have. So let go of exacting realism being your primary focus. Technical stuff is really cool. Don't get me wrong. I love to shoot about carpentry and, stroke work and, all of that and ratios of the face and all. I love that. I dig it. But it's also just secondary because your viewer is never going to notice how dissimilar the curve of that model's nose is to the other. And, most people know that you have hands instead of a lens. So there's no way for you to perfectly replicate their face.
And then did you have a second? Was that, I just didn't want to talk over your...
Oh, geez, no, I think it was,
Okay.
it was a two-parter. We touched on stuff. Oh, I guess, did you have any unfortunate pushback aside from people telling you how to use a power tool?
Yay!
Yeah.
Yeah, and even then, I think it's well meant. The only thing I would say, and this didn't actually happen here, is that people have held issue with the facts, and that is absolutely not real. you're wrong. All right, well, that's your opinion. Facts aren't feelings, you know. We're all learning that one, but, you know, do your research, feel free. I have, so I do know that that's real. But the other thing is that a lot of people do come in here and say the one thing that I really dislike is that there's a certain, you know, gender that sucks. No, that's not what the work is about. It's just about promoting safety and understanding safety and what we can do as humans together to promote safety. And not unlike what you make work about, it's just about if we're together, there's so much power in that. It's like magic, you guys. If you're into that sort of thing. So, you know, getting everybody kind of on board with keeping all of us safe means that suddenly now everyone is.
I'm sure you have it somewhere, but do you have a list of your citations that is outable?
I didn't put it with the titles this time, but I do have it for all of the works prior. And we did try to get one of the volunteers to go through 5 years worth of like over 150 little like offhand factoids to compile those next to the images that I used to, you know, kind of match with that fact. And but that's just, you know, not a very big job at all.
I was just making here's the packet.
Yeah, right.
115 things that I went and looked up, and you're fun with that.
If anybody feels so inclined or knows an up-and-coming writer or somebody who just really likes to type on a computer, by all means, give them my number, because I hate that, and I do not want to do it. However, it's something that does need to be done, because there's so much information out there that I've gleaned over the years that I can absolutely say without a shadow of a doubt that it needs to be compiled. There's patterns in this. There's very, very much on purpose a big, ugly idea that keeping people in the place that, you know, we've been trying to put them through other means of controlling the populace. There's reasons for it. And it starts to become very self-evident once you look at all these facts and you're like, what the, no, it can't be. You know, how do we do it? How do we fight it? But just the little things, keeping each other safe, that's the idea.
Are there any last questions? Anyone?
You guys don't want to know about router bits or anything? No?
I have a question about the materials. Given that you work a lot with wood, is any of the wood chosen deliberately?
Yes.
And if so, why?
Yes, so I only work with pine, and I feel that that's really important for me as somebody who's grown up in Colorado, who's using, most of my models are from here, or grew up around here, their experiences are all in Colorado, and I feel like once I stopped, I was very oddly obsessed with painting it all black at one point. Now I've completely let that go. And I really want that pine with that raw quality to show through. A lot of my subjects have used that word as well, raw. And how to do that, I think, is letting the wood do the work. And so I use pine because it's also soft. And as a female, my hand strength is not the same as a male's. I cannot, you know, especially speaking of the router specifically, changing out those bits, those are not made for girl hands. Like I can barely get that thing loosened up. So learning how to work them, but also learning how they work for me, that's a whole other thing. And but yeah, I try to use pine exclusively. And I think that even going a step further with that making, I would really love to find some more locally sourced pine that's, you know, with where I'm making the work from. I think that would be twice as impactful. And I try to stick to 2x4s because I think not only is that really accessible and less expensive, but they're not as well milled, so that there's that raw quality to them. They splinter better, you know, they shred a little better. There's a lot more there. So I prefer to like rip the wood or do that kind of work and then create. But sometimes I just have to go get a better milled piece, as it were. But yeah, I try to stick to that, and I try to show all of the nails and all of the chinks and all of the mistakes. Now I'm not going back. There's a few pieces where you'll see I went back through with some wood putty. I try not to do that anymore. I really want everybody to see every, oops and whoops and, that kind of, that part of your making. That in carpentry, so much of the deal is you walk up to it and you go like, oh, how on earth, and there's that disconnect. And so I think that that by showing like all the little holes and scratches and nicks, and it also makes it a lot easier when you're doing transportation, you have to take it all apart and put it back together, that it makes it, first of all, more approachable, second of all, easier to understand, and then third of all, it makes it more transportable. So, yeah.
If you don't mind a comment on that, what I also took away as something really interesting is that a lot of these stories, even if walking in the grocery store, no one would ever know, a lot of these survivors feels like everyone can see. They can see all the injuries, all the damage, everywhere where they've stumbled or have failed.
Yes.
And that exposure it really resonates here. Yeah.
Thank you. That was a big part of it. When that was on our first meeting, I said, I'm really working on this word raw. And that's my biggest goal for this show. And whether it's through string or whether it's through unfinished fabric or unfinished canvas or whether it's through, that's my big focus here. Is it's just raw, and thank you. Because yes, that is a lot of what we feel. And that's not specific to violence and not specific to surviving violence, but it is a lot of what folks experience after survival, and that everybody can see right through this. Nobody can, but that there's that shift. So thank you.
So I also wanted to say, as we kind of close this out, we'll be able to do a walkthrough, and you can ask Amy questions about specific works as we do the walkthrough. I wanted to give you a chance to, part of the residency is curating the South Gallery as well, and I wanted to just ask, what was your process on selecting and who you selected and all that.
Kung Chu. Okay, yeah. I selected the amazing Lindy Bush, who's here. And she's a fabulous realist. I wanted somebody who could also tell a story through realism, but it was a completely different story than I was telling. Mm-hmm. So I wanted, Lindy does plein air, but she's very specific in what she picks and how she's picking it and what she's doing. So I thought, and she's very great about integrating her story and the story of all, of all of us through that. So, and it was working because gosh darn it, these things are huge that I made. So I was like, how can we do all of that? And I wanted it to be somebody who I respect as a person as well. So, Lindy's the trifecta. She hits it all.
Thank you. I appreciate the opportunity to keep together.
Thank you. I really loved how there was that dichotomy of like the really big works and like the really like the action, and then moving into the South Gallery, the small works, but you really have to get super close to just see. But then also that connection of your work to where you came from, because you had like the pictures of the spaces that were behind it. So very meaningful works, but just in a smaller scale. So it's great.
There you go. It's the big sky and the big place that we all live in a really small way. And then these really small humans in a really big way. And it's kind of that fun juxtaposition. Yeah. So it works beautifully.
So last question is, where do you want to take your work next?
I'm so glad you asked, Elaine. I will be teaching a class. There you go, right? A bunch of things. We've been spitballing. So teaching here, I'll be doing some classes with kids, kind of breaking away from the big, heavy ideas about art. And it's pretty rad to watch your art move, especially if you're young. Get in there really early, get those juices flowing, because it's not hard. And it's super, super fun. That second, grants on grants on grants. We'll see if I get any of them. Right? But also just acquiring some new tools. So there's a lot of things I learned about this, and most of it is that the way I want things to move and my ideas are really limited by my tools and by my skills. So there's only so much I can do with the tools I have. There's only so much you can do with the tools available in the world. So until I can get a hold of some things that are a lot more precision, that's going to be a little limiting in terms of how I can get these guys to move around. But ultimately, the 10-year goal is to, I want this stuff to be in very, very publicly accessible spaces where anybody, whether you're capable, what's difficult about this work is not everybody is bodily capable of kind of doing that, and so if it's a button or, small crank or that kind of thing, and that it's wall-sized, and that you're completely overtaken by the experience, and so it's all around you, and there's sound integrated, movement integrated, light integrated all in one piece. Whereas right now I kind of am focusing on, this is the sound piece, this is the moving piece, this is the light piece. So putting all of it together.
And as far as, because you do have a workshop coming up, Kinetics 101. So if you are interested in making a smaller version of one of these pieces, Amy actually works through it and talks you through it and has the pieces prepared for you, so it's very accessible. You do have to use power tools, so you need to, know that as you go into it. But a very accessible, kind of mini downsized of, I think, that piece, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then you can kind of see what it would look like in the front piece over there. But that is March 3rd, right?
Yeah.
March 3rd from 3 p.m. to 5 p.m. And I think there's still spaces, so you can sign up on our website. So before we close down, I just wanted to say, actually, we'll just say thank you here, and then I'll give you directions on what we're supposed to do next. So do you have anything else that you would like to share?
No, thanks you guys for coming. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, so